Let's do a quick test. You're booking a hotel room, and the only one available is on the 13th floor. Or you're scheduling something important, and the only free date is Friday the 13th. Does something tighten just slightly, even if you don't consider yourself superstitious?
For a significant portion of people, yes, absolutely yes. And the remarkable thing is that this fear, this vague unease around the number 13 and this particular day is one of the most widespread superstitions in the modern world, across cultures that have almost nothing else in common.
There's even a clinical name for it. Fear of the number 13 is called triskaidekaphobia, and fear of Friday the 13th specifically is called paraskevidecatriaphobia, which is one of the more impressive words in the English language and also almost impossible to say quickly.
Paraskevidecatriaphobia. From the Greek paraskevi for Friday, dekatria for 13, and phobia for fear. Someone sat down and constructed that word very deliberately, and I respect the commitment.
But here's the thing that most people don't know. Friday the 13th, as a combined specific fear, is actually quite recent. It barely appears in historical records before the 19th century.
Because Friday as an unlucky day and 13 as an unlucky number started as two completely separate superstitions, different origins, different cultures, different centuries, and they only merged, fused into the single fear we know today within the last 200 years or so.
So let's unpick them separately, starting with 13.
The fear of 13 is ancient, and it shows up in multiple independent cultures, which is part of what makes it so interesting. When you see the same superstition appearing independently in places that had no contact with each other, it suggests there might be something more fundamental going on than pure cultural transmission.
One of the oldest and most cited origins is Norse mythology. There's a story, recorded in the Prose Edda, the 13th century compilation of Norse myths, about a banquet in Valhalla. 12 gods are gathered at the table: Odin, Thor, Freya, the full company. A perfect, complete number.
Then a 13th guest arrives uninvited, Loki, the trickster god, the agent of chaos. And Loki's presence at the feast sets in motion a chain of events that leads to the death of Balder, the most beloved of the gods. The 13th guest breaks the harmony, introduces disorder, causes tragedy.
Now, Norse mythology is one source, but the fear of 13 also appears in Christian tradition, and this one is probably more directly influential on modern Western superstition: the Last Supper.
Jesus and his 12 apostles, 13 people at the table, and the next day, the crucifixion. The 13th person present at that dinner was either Jesus himself, about to be betrayed, or Judas Iscariot, the betrayer, depending on how you count.
Either way, the association lodged itself into Christian culture. 13 at a table means someone will die. The superstition was so widespread in medieval and early modern Europe that there are records of people refusing to sit at a table of 13, and professional dinner guests called quatrizines in France, who could be hired specifically to make up a 14th at a dinner party and prevent the unlucky number.
The professional 14th dinner guest. That is a job title I would like to have had.
There's also a mathematical angle. 12 is a remarkably useful number. It's divisible by 2, 3, 4, and 6. The ancient world ran on 12s. 12 months in a year, 12 hours in the day and 12 in the night, 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 inches in a foot.
12 felt complete, orderly, satisfying, and 13, coming immediately after this perfect number, felt like the disruption of that order. One too many, the number that breaks the pattern.
Numerologists and early mathematicians sometimes describes 12 as a perfect number and 13 as its corruption, the number that represents excess, imbalance, the step beyond completion.
This attitude toward 13 shaped architecture and urban planning in ways that are still visible today. Many buildings, particularly in the United States, have no 13th floor. The lift goes from 12 to 14. which is completely irrational from an engineering perspective because the floor is obviously still there, it's just labeled 14, which somehow makes everyone feel better, even people who would tell you they're not superstitious at all.
A study in the United States found that approximately 85% of high-rise buildings skip the 13th floor in their numbering. The floor exists. People live and work on it. It's just called 14, which somehow makes everyone feel better, even people who would tell you they're not superstitious at all.
Same with street addresses. There are streets in various cities where the number 13 is simply absent from the numbering, 11, 12, 14, as if 13 never happened.
Now let's look at Friday, because Friday has its own entirely separate tradition of bad luck, and it's even older.
In Christian tradition, Friday is the day of the crucifixion. Good Friday, which is one of those interesting cases where good doesn't mean pleasant but rather holy or sacred, is the commemoration of the most significant death in Christian theology. Friday, as a day of mourning, fasting, and suffering, was embedded into Christian culture from very early on.
Medieval Christians fasted on Fridays. Certain activities were considered inappropriate on Fridays. Beginning a journey, starting a new project, making an important decision. You didn't begin things on the day of the crucifixion. It was a day for solemnity, not initiative.
There's a medieval saying, recorded in various forms across England and France, that warns against starting work on Friday. Ships launched on Friday were considered unlucky. Businesses started on a Friday were expected to fail. The superstition was widespread enough that it genuinely affected commercial behavior.
But Friday also had a complicated relationship with pre-Christian European tradition. Friday is named after Frigg, or in some traditions, Freya, the Norse goddess of love, fertility, and domestic life. Frigga's day became Friday.
When Christianity spread through Northern Europe, it had an awkward relationship with the old pagan days and their associated deities. Frigg and Freya were sometimes conflated and sometimes demonized by Christian writers. The day named after a goddess of love and magic became associated with witchcraft and ill fortune in some Christian traditions.
There are accounts from early modern Europe of Friday being called the Witches' Sabbath, the day when witches gathered, when dark magic was worked, when the veil between the ordinary world and the dangerous supernatural was thin. This is distinct from the Saturday Sabbath of Jewish tradition and the Sunday Sabbath of Christian worship. Friday as a day of occult danger was a specific folkloric tradition.
So by the late medieval period, Friday had accumulated multiple layers of bad association. The crucifixion, the pagan goddess turned demonic, the witch's day, all stacking up on the same day of the week.
But here's the crucial point, and this is the bit that surprises most people. For most of this history, the unlucky day wasn't Friday the 13th. It was just Friday. Any Friday. The 13th had nothing to do with it.
The two superstitions, unlucky Fridays and unlucky 13ths, were circling each other for centuries without merging. There are references to both in medieval and early modern literature, but they're separate, independent, not yet combined.
So when did they fuse? When did Friday the 13th become the specific, combined fear it is today?
Historians who's looked at this carefully point to the 19th century as the period when the combinations started to appear in writing, but the moment that really seems to have crystallized the modern superstition is surprisingly specific.
On Friday the 13th of October, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the simultaneous arrest of hundreds of Knights Templar across France. The Templars, a wealthy and powerful military order that had accumulated enormous influence and debt-holding power over the French crown, were accused of heresy, blasphemy, and various other charges that most historians now consider fabricated.
Hundreds were arrested on that single Friday. Many were tortured, many were eventually executed. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake in 1314. It was one of the most dramatic single acts of political violence in medieval European history.
And according to some accounts, de Molay cursed King Philip IV and Pope Clement V from the flames, predicting that both would die within a year. Philip died 7 months later. Clement died the following month. Whether the curse had anything to do with it is obviously a matter of interpretation, but the timing lodged itself in the historical imagination.
Now, here's where we have to be careful. The connection between this specific Friday the 13th and the modern superstition is popular, frequently cited, and genuinely dramatic, but historians debate how directly it actually influenced the modern fear. The Templar story was not widely known outside scholarly circles until the 19th century, when it was popularized in Romantic and Gothic literature.
What seems more likely is that the Templar story was absorbed into an already forming cultural narrative about Friday the 13th, that it became one of several historical events associated with the date, lending the combination of Friday and 13 a weight of historical evidence that felt more substantial than either superstition alone.
The first clear, explicit reference to Friday the 13th as a specifically unlucky combined date that historians have found in English-language sources comes from the late 19th century. A biography of the Italian composer Gioacchino Rossini, published in 1869, notes that Rossini considered Fridays unlucky and 13 unlucky, and that he died on a Friday the 13th in November 1868.
That may be the first time the combination appears explicitly in print as a unified concept. A famous man's death on a Friday on the 13th, noted with a shudder.
And then in 1907, an American businessman and stockbroker named Thomas William Lawson published a novel called Friday the 13th. It was a thriller about a Wall Street broker who deliberately chooses Friday the 13th to crash the stock market, exploiting investors' superstitions. It was enormously popular, widely read.
And that novel, a piece of popular fiction, appears to have done as much as anything to cement the combined superstition in the modern popular imagination. The idea that Friday the 13th was a single, unified event of bad luck, rather than two separate traditions, solidified in the early 20th century.
Which means that one of the most widespread superstitions in the modern world was largely popularized by a novel written in 1907, which is frankly extraordinary.
And then the 20th century did the rest. The Friday the 13th film franchise, beginning in 1980, gave the date a visual identity. Jason Voorhees, the hockey mask, the relentless horror. A generation of filmgoers had the date associated with dread, blood, and unstoppable menace.
Popular culture didn't create the superstition, but it amplified it, reinforced it, and gave it imagery that embedded the fear in people who might otherwise have dismissed it entirely. The number 13 on a door, the date on a calendar, now they carry not just an old religious association, but the visceral memory of a horror franchise.
There's an economic dimension to this superstition that's worth mentioning. Researchers have estimated that the United States alone loses somewhere between $800 million and $900 million on every Friday the 13th, due to people avoiding travel, business transactions, weddings, and major decisions.
Some airlines report measurable drops in bookings on Friday the 13th. Some property markets show lower transaction volumes. People delay surgeries, postpone decisions, cancel plans.
All because two separate medieval superstitions about an unlucky day and an unlucky number fused in the 19th century, got amplified by a novel, and then got a horror franchise.
The machinery of superstition is really just the machinery of storytelling. A story gets told often enough, dramatically enough, by authoritative enough sources, and it starts to feel like a fact about the world, like something written into nature itself.
And yet, the date genuinely does not produce worse outcomes. Studies looking at accident rates, hospital admissions, and financial performance on Friday the 13th versus other Fridays show no statistically significant difference.
Except in one curious respect. Some studies have found slightly lower accident rates on Friday the 13th because people are more cautious. They drive more carefully. They pay more attention. The superstition, in a self-defeating way, may actually make the day marginally safer than average.
The fear of bad luck, making people more careful, reducing the bad luck, which is perhaps the most human thing about this entire story.
Absolutely. And on that note, thank you so much for listening to The Why Behind Everything. If you've been enjoying these episodes, please do subscribe on YouTube. It really does make a difference.
Next time,
We're asking a question that sounds like a simple physics problem, but turns into something much stranger. Why do mirrors show your left side? Or do they? The answer involves a misconception that almost everyone has and an explanation that will genuinely change how you look at your own reflection.
See you then.